politically incorrect statement.
നീ അവിടെ പോയിരുന്നേ നീ തുടങ്ങാം.
Hello all, welcome to 90 Plus India's first animated live tuition. Welcome, and today here I am, Alka Regimon, your biology tutor, and we'll be having a one short session. Yes, so from the background itself, I think the chapter is clear to you. So yes, today we are going the one shot of your 6th chapter, Control and Coordination. And in this session, we'll be discussing the entire concepts from this chapter in a very short period, almost under 1 hour, and we'll be finishing the entire concept in these time. So yes, so without wasting much time, let's begin the session. I hope you all are ready, and yes, see again, once again, welcome. So yes, nervous system in animals is the first and foremost topic that we need to discuss in this chapter, Control and Coordination. And as you all know, nervous system in animal, it's basically made up of the small cells called neurons, right? So neurons are nothing but they are the structural and the functional unit of our nervous system, which is one of the most important systems inside a living organism. And then we need to know what is the structure of a neuron is. So let's discuss the structure of a neuron with the help of an animation. Okay. So sir, can we play the animation? The structure of a neuron. Let's see how the neuron is basically divided into and what are the parts of a neuron. Yes. So here it is. So yes. So this is basically how a neuron looks like, and the first part we need to study in the structure of a neuron is this branch like extending that is called the dendrites. The dendrites. And after the dendrites comes, yes, the sub branches, or you can say when you're looking at the figure, it's clear that the main branch coming out of the cell body of this neuron is basically called the dendron. So dendron is basically getting divided into dendrites. And then after the dendron, there comes the major part of a neuron, which is the centralmost cell body. Or you can also call it as soma, or it's also known as in the name of cyton. So yes, cyton, soma, or cell body. That's the central part of the neuron. And after that, yes, the long filament. Here in this animation, it's clear to you that this long filament coming out of the cell body and is extending till the end of the neuron is called the axon. And then finally, yes sir? Yes, and also you can see the additional cells which is built up on the axon, and these small cells which is seen on the axon or around the axon is called the Schwann cells. And after the Schwann cells, there comes these small branches which is branching out of the longer filament axon, and that small branches are called the axonites. Yes. And at the end of the axonites, you can see, once again, you can see these bulb-like or globe-like small bubbles, which are basically known as the knobs or the synaptic knob. The synaptic knob and the axonite together constitutes the nerve ending. That's pretty much about the structure of a neuron. And inside the cell body, you can also see this prominent nucleus which is present. And other than the nucleus, there are several cell organelles inside the cell body, including the cytoplasm, just like all the remaining cells in our body. Yes, sir, thank you. Okay. So that's basically the structure of a neuron in a single shot. Now let's see which are the important positions of these parts. Let's see the parts of each neuron and what these parts are basically doing inside the neuron. So let's see. So the first part is basically the cell body or the cyton, and as I've already said, you can also name it as cyton. It's also called the cyton. So the cell body or cytosol is the main part of the neuron, and this is the region where the nucleus, cytoplasm and all the remaining organelles are seen, and cell body is the region which receives the signals from the dendron. Yeah, from the dendron the signals are given to the cell body. Yes, and then comes the dendron, which is the part looking like a branch, right? So the branches that is coming out of the cell body, the short filament from the cell body, this one, these branches are called the short filaments coming out of the cell body is called the dendron, and dendron is the part that is carrying the impulse from the dendrite to the cell body. Yes, and then comes our dendrite, and dendrite is basically the branches of dendron, and it receives impulses from the just nearby neuron. And then you have the axon. Yeah, as I've already said, this is a longer filament of the cell body. This entire part is a longer filament of the cell body, and it is carrying the impulse from the cell body till the axon end, or till the axonite. Yes, and then you have the axonite, which are the branches of axon, and it is carrying impulses into the synaptic knob. Yeah, that's pretty much about it. And talking about the synaptic knobs are these bulbs which are seen at the end of the axonites, and these lobes are the ones which is secreting the neurotransmitters. So these knobs can produce certain chemicals from it during the impulse transmission, and these neurotransmitters can be acetylcholine or serotonin, dopamine, etc. Yes, that's pretty much about our neuron. And then let's discuss about the next topic, which are receptors. So all the sense organs in our body do have this particular structure called receptors, and these receptors are the part which is detecting the stimuli from the environment. So whenever a change is happening around your body, like a change in temperature, a change in pressure, a change in the sound, or change in light, any sort of stimuli like that can be detected into the body, or it is taken into the body through these receptors. So let's see which are these receptors. I'll give you a quick review. So inside the eye, this is the structure of an eye, and inside the eye you do have this retinal portion, or the inner layer of the eye, and inside the retina you can see certain photoreceptor cells. And this is an enlarged picture of several types of photoreceptors. You can see the cone cells, the rod cells, etc. These are different types of photoreceptors which take up the stimuli of light inside the eye. And then inside the nose you have the olfactory receptors. Here you can see the figure of olfactory receptors, which is basically detecting smell that is just happening outside the body, and takes the smell into the brain and senses the smell. And then you have the skin, and in the skin not just one but several type of receptors are seen. You can see the touch receptor, you can see the pain receptor. All these are seen inside the or under the skin. And then other than skin there is ear, the other sense organ. Yes, and inside the ear also you can see several parts which is basically taking part in the transmission of signals, which is also which is carrying the sound vibration. So basically carrying the impulse of sound. And yeah, the same thing is happening in the tongue also. In the tongue also you have the taste buds, which is acting like a receptor. So the entire story can be concluded in this single table, and here it is very crystal clear that eyes have photoreceptors and it is present inside the retina. Nose has olfactory receptors which is present in the nasal chamber. Taste, in the case of tongue, there is gustatory receptor which is in the taste buds. Then the sound, in the case of ear, auditory receptors are present and it is seen inside the cochlear structure. And finally in the skin, there are several types of stimuli which is the skin receiving, not only temperature, the touch. There are several kinds, the pain, all these stimuli are taken by the skin. So different kind of receptors can be seen under the layers of skin, like the tactile receptor for the touch, the thermoreceptors to detect the temperature variation, the mechanoreceptors to understand the variations in the pressure, like if a touch is hard or a touch is slow or a touch is how smooth it is or what kind of wind is blowing on you. These all can be detected with the presence of this mechanoreceptor, which is basically detecting the pressure variations. So yeah, these are the various kinds of receptors in the body, and I would say the olfactory receptors and the gustatory receptors has been repeatedly asked before, and they are they are mostly important among the entire table. So yes, that's pretty much about it. Now we need to discuss what these receptors are, what response is, and what stimulus is. So you already have an idea, but let me give you a quick refresh. That is, stimulus is basically any change that is happening in the environment. Stimulus is any change happening in the environment can be called as a stimulus or stimuli. And then whenever the change in the environment is causing us to react, then we call it as the response. And finally, these stimuli are basically taken into the body through our receptors that we have already discussed. So receptors are some specialized cell which receive the stimuli, and all these three terms are very important, and you should always know the differences between each and every term. So there is the stimulus. Here in the figure you can see fire is depicted. So fire can be a stimulus in certain cases. Suppose you are touching a hot object, or you are touching your gas stove which is already burning. So when you touch fire, that is a stimulus. That touch caused by, or the heat caused by the fire is a stimulus. And what is your quick response? Your quick response would be to withdraw your hand from the fire, or would you just keep it there for a longer period? No, you would quickly withdraw your hand for your safety. And that withdrawal, that action is the response you are giving to the stimuli. And then comes the receptor. So who is the one who is basically acting in between these two objects, that is the stimulus and the response? The stimulus is taken into the skin only with the help of receptors that is present inside the skin or under the skin. And here, because it is fire, because it is temperature variation, our thermoreceptors would be taking part, and you can also say that the pain receptors are also acting. Temperature, when it is reaching a height, would basically get converted into the pain receptor. Yeah. That's pretty much about the terms, and now we need to know how the impulses are being transmitted, and we can use an animation so that you can quickly understand how, when you touch an object or when you have a stimuli around you, how it is basically getting transmitted from the end of your body to the brain and how you give the response. Yes, so let's see. Let's pause and play. Yes, so you are touching an object which is very hot. The impulse is being transmitted through your nerves, and it is carried on to the spinal cord area, and the response is given back to the effector muscles, and the effector muscles quickly take back your hands or the particular effector muscle from the action place or from that stimuli. So let's see it again. Once you touch it, that impulse is taken by the receptors, passed on through the nerves, it gives to the spinal cord, and the response is given back to the effector muscles, and yes, the response is undertaken. Yes, that's basically how the impulse gets transmitted, and you can see the flow chart. So let's see the flow chart. This flow chart is very important, that is the transmission of nerve impulses. It is very important. So the first stage is a hot object is there. So you are touching the hot object, and the pain receptors understand that it is a hot object. So this stimulus which is detected by the pain receptors is given to the dendrite of your neuron, and then the dendrite passes it on to the dendron. From the dendron, the impulse goes on to the cell body or the cytone. Just remember the structure of a neuron. I'm talking about the structure of neuron. And from the cell body, the impulse goes on to the axon, to the axonites, to the synaptic knob. From the synaptic knob, once the impulse has reached the end of the nerve or the synaptic knob, then a chemical release is happening, which, as I've already said, the neurotransmitters get emitted or ejected out of this synaptic knob. And yes, this chemical release is basically given into the synapse. And what is synapse? Synapse is basically the junction between two neurons, and to that gap, to that junction, the chemicals are released. And that release, which is at present, it is present in the synapse, and now from the synapse, these chemicals will be released onto the dendrites of the next neuron. So here you can see how the transmission is basically happening from one neuron to the next neuron. So yeah, that's it. And since we have already said about the term synapse, synapse is the junction between two neurons, and there comes another term which is neuromuscular junction. Both of them are important, and neuromuscular junction is also a junction, but this is the junction between, as the name suggests, it is a junction between a neuron and a muscle. So if the junction is between one neuron and another neuron, then that is called the synapse, while the junction between a neuron and a muscle cell is called neuromuscular junction. So that's pretty much about the structure and the transmission of impulses happening inside a neuron. Now let's discuss what a reflex action is. Okay. So reflex action. The term would be familiar to you. Let's see how it is important to our concept. So in the case of reflex action is just an automatic and spontaneous response. An automatic, spontaneous, a quick automatic response which is given by our body itself is called a reflex action. And this response is given to the stimuli. And stimuli can be anything that is happening around our body. It can be a dangerous situation, it can be a temperature variation, a light stimuli, it can be anything. So if the body detects something wrong or some emergency situation like a fight or flight emergency situation, then quickly the body do this reflex action, which is the involuntary automatic response. So there are spinal reflexes as well as cerebral reflexes. Basically, spinal cord is a part where most of the reflections are getting emitted from. Spinal cord is the one who is acting as a hero in reflex action. So when we are talking about reflex action, we should know what a reflex arc is, and reflex arc is nothing but the pathway taken by the nerve impulses in a reflex action is called the reflex arc. And and this reflex arc is basically formed inside a spinal cord, and although the spinal cord is the hero in the reflex action, it doesn't stop there. അവിടെ വെച്ചിട്ട് ഇത് കഴിഞ്ഞു പോകുന്നില്ല. നമ്മുടെ റിഫ്ലെക്സ് ആക്ഷനോടുകൂടെ റിഫ്ലെക്സ് ആക്ഷൻ എത്തുന്നു, അത് നമ്മുടെ സ്പൈനൽ കോഡിൽ എത്തുന്നതോടുകൂടെ the process is not over. This process is basically taken to the brain also, but it is happening in the underground. At a time, spinal cord response കൊടുക്കുന്നു, നമ്മൾ action എടുക്കുന്നു, we are responding to the stimuli, but that information is already given to the brain. It goes on to the brain. Brain അറിയാതൊന്നും സംഭവിക്കുന്നില്ല. So that's it. And this reflex arc is very important, and inside the reflex arc a flowchart can be asked, an explanatory question with the diagrammatic representation. This diagram is very, very important. These all things can be asked from the reflex action, reflex arc part. So yes, here you can see that the receptor on the body gets activated. That's the first stage. And from the receptor, it can be a heat receptor, a temperature receptor, it can be anything. So once you touch a hot object, the receptors are activated. Now the receptors give this information to the sensory neuron of your body. Sensory neurons are the neurons which carries the impulse from the receptor to the brain or to the nervous system, you can say. So yes, so that after the sensory neuron carries this information the whole way to the spinal cord. Here you can see the spinal cord, or our major central nervous system is here, right? So the spinal cord get activated. That spinal cord gets the message that okay, some emergency is there. So inside the spinal cord, the sensory neuron basically communicate this information with another neuron, and that neuron is called the relay neuron. So the sensory neuron reaches the spinal cord. Inside the spinal cord, the sensory neuron communicates to the next neuron, that is relay neuron. Relay neuron is the connecting point between the sensory neuron and the next neuron. And from the relay neuron, this information is carried on to our next neuron, that is the motor neuron. Yes, the motor neuron. So there is sensory neuron, effector neuron, and then the motor neuron. So this motor neuron is the one which is basically carrying the effect or the response which is given by the central nervous system. So central nervous system detects an emergency and gives a solution. The solution is to withdraw the hand. So that solution is taken from the spinal cord to that effector organ, and here in this case the effector organ is the muscle in your arm. So you have to basically move the muscles in your arm so that you can withdraw your hand, right? So here the motor neuron basically communicates this information to the final organ, that is the effector muscle or the effector organ. Yes. So here you can see the entire story, and this is one of the very most important flowcharts in this chapter, one of the diagrams that you should always remember. So this is how a reflex action is happening and reflex action is moving. This is what you need to draw when what a reflex arc is asked. If something regarding reflex arc or something regarding the actions happening in a reflex action or something is asked, this is what you need to draw. So basically, the receptor organ is the first part getting activated. The information is given to the sensory neuron, then relay neuron, motor neuron, effector muscles, and then the hand withdrawal. Here in this case, hand withdrawal. Otherwise, it can be any sort of response. That's it. So yes, that's pretty much about the reflex action, reflex arc and everything. And here comes the next major heading under this chapter, which is human brain. Okay, so let's see the major concepts coming under brain. Basically we need to discuss the parts of a brain, the major functions done by brain. That's it. Although it looks a bit complicated, but this portion is very easy to go through. So let's see. So this is the structure of a brain, and we can see the animation of a brain so that you will get a much better picture of the brain structure. So before getting into the animation, let me give you a quick idea that the brain is basically divided into three parts. Okay, we can basically divide the brain into three parts for the purpose of our study, and it is forebrain, midbrain and the hindbrain. Okay, these are the three major parts which is coming under the brain classification. So just keep it in mind, and then we can see the animation so that you will get a quick idea. Yes, sir. Let's see the structure or the parts of a brain, of a human brain. Yes. So here it is the entire cross section of your brain. This is a major part, that is cerebrum. Yes, part by part. So this is the major part, the first part, the highlighted pink portion. That entire region is the cerebrum. The majority of the area of a brain is covered with this part, that is cerebrum. And then after cerebrum, yes, comes the smaller region which is almost to the center of the brain but not the center. But again, it is called the thalamus. And just below the thalamus, yes, just below the thalamus, you can see a minor portion called hypothalamus. Hypo means just under, or epi, like epi and hypo. So above and under. So this small region which is just below the thalamus is called the hypothalamus. So the cerebrum, thalamus and hypothalamus together constitutes our forebrain. I hope you got the idea. Okay, let's see. Hiya. And then comes the next classification part, that is the midbrain. So the region from which the brain stem, the stem of the brain, or this, you can see this longer filament coming out of the brain. So the region from which this stem is starting is what you call as the midbrain, almost the central portion. Yes, that's pretty much about the midbrain. And then, yeah, yes, then you can see the small brain inside the brain. Yeah. You can remove the pons. Yeah. So here you can see the cerebellum, which is a small brain inside the brain. It is almost there at the reverse part, at the behind portion of your brain, and cerebellum is one of the next important portion, and other part is, yes, yeah, the just below the midbrain portion you can see that small bulging area which is called the pons. It is a little bit projected outside, and under the pons, yes, yes sir, and then you have the medulla. So sir, the band. So after this medulla, or just after the medulla, you can see the spinal cord is emerging from this region. So the cerebellum, pons and medulla together constitutes the part called hindbrain. Yes, so that's about the forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain of the brain structure. Okay, so thank you. Yes. Okay. So that's about the structure of brain. Now let me tell you certain extra points that you need to know about the brain. That is basically, as you all know, brain is a part of our nervous system, right? So nervous system is basically classified into two types: the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is the part which is basically carrying the major responsibilities, and our brain and spinal cord is constituted under this part. So the central nervous system is made up of two parts, that is the brain, the major most organ in the body, and then the spinal cord, which is extending part from the brain. Yeah. And then comes the peripheral nervous system, which is constituting all the nerves in your body. All the nerves and the small nerves, the bigger nerves, the extensions of nerve, all these are coming under the system of peripheral nervous system. So any nerves emerging from the central or the from the brain or the spinal cord is basically called the peripheral nervous system. It constitutes the peripheral nervous system. Now the central nervous system, which is the first one, is brain, and brain is the part which is receiving all the informations in your body, and this is one of the major part where the thought processes are being processed and activated and responded. Yeah. So this one major most part needs a lot of protection, and one of the protection that is given to the brain is through this bony structure, our skull, or it's also called the cranium. The bony covering of the brain is one of the major protection. Then comes the meninges, and meninges is nothing but these layers of tissue. Okay, meninges is these layers. You can see the layers of tissue just outside of the brain. Here, this is the brain. This is a zoomed in picture of a brain, and just above that you can see these layers, three membranes of layers, and these three membrane layer of meninges can be seen, and it is giving most of the protection from the infections as well as the physical injuries. And then there is the cerebrospinal fluid. You have heard about it, cerebrospinal fluid, the CSF. So the CSF is basically the fluid that is inside the brain, and this fluid here you can see it in this blue color, the figure. So it is filled inside the membrane, inside the meninges as well as in the areas of the brain foldings, and it is giving a protection to the brain. That's the third part. And yeah, that's pretty much about the protection. And in the case of spinal cord, also, spinal cord is basically extending from the bottom portion of our brain stem, right? And this is also protected. This is also an important part of the nervous system. So it is basically protected by the meninges and CSF, just like the brain. And other than that, there is an extra structure called the vertebral column, or something that we call the backbone. It is a bony protection. So this vertebral column in spinal cord is similar to the cranium in brain. So yeah, that's about it. And yeah, the peripheral nervous system, that is all the nerves are arising from the brain as well as the spinal cord, right? And it is all made up of the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves. Cranial nerves are the one which is emerging from the brain, and then you have the spinal nerves. So all these constitutes together the peripheral nervous system. So that's pretty much about it. Now, as we have already discussed the parts of human brain, you have seen the animation. Now let's see what are the functions of each and every part. So I've already showed you the brain is basically divided into forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. So yeah. Okay. So the forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. So let's see. The forebrain is the major thinking part. I have already shown you. This cerebrum, thalamus and hypothalamus is coming under the forebrain, and this is the major thinking portion, the thought process, the memory process, your processings of your thinking. All this is happening, and most of the sensory information, the information from your sense organs, these all are getting informed in the forebrain portion. Okay. So the major parts coming under what you need to study is which are the major parts and what are the functions of these major parts. So the parts coming in the forebrain are the cerebrum, thalamus and hypothalamus. So cerebrum is something related with your vision, thinking, learning, memory, etc. And you need to focus or you need to by heart or you need to study all these stuff. What are the functions of cerebrum? And then the thalamus. Thalamus is basically always known as the relay station. And relay station is nothing but this is the interconnecting region between the outer environment and the inner environment of your body. So they basically carry on the information from the outside to the inside or inside to the outside. So thalamus is the relay station. And then you have the hypothalamus, which is basically taking care of the hunger, the thirst, the mood, the sex drive of your body. All these are taken care by the hypothalamus. So yes, that's pretty much about our cerebrum. And then you have the midbrain. And midbrain is basically, there is no much classifications under the NCERT for midbrain. So midbrain, all you need to know is that some of the most important involuntary actions are controlled by midbrain. It is acting along with our hindbrain, and most of the actions are done in coordination with the hindbrain. The midbrain is not doing it alone, but in coordination with the hindbrain. So the involuntary actions, that's the midbrain. And then comes our hindbrain, right? You have already seen the figure, you have already seen the animation. Our cerebellum, the pons region and the medullary region together constitutes the hindbrain, the bottom portion, or you can say the behind portion of your brain. So let's see the function of each one of it. Cerebellum, the first part, as I've already said, there is a brain-like structure inside the brain. So cerebellum is the part which is taking care of the posture and balances of your body. Basically, when you get drunk and you lose the control of your body, of your walking, of your sitting position and all, the part which is getting affected by the alcohol is your cerebellum. Okay, so cerebellum is taking care of the posture and balance of your body, and if you're not able to have a good posture or a good balance, then blame your cerebellum. Yes, and then you have the medulla, that bulged portion, right? So medulla is one of the most important portions in the hindbrain, which is taking care of the involuntary actions which are very much important, like the blood pressure, the salivation, vomiting, heart rhythm, etc. So here you can see the rhythm of your heart is being controlled by the part which is just available in the hindbrain, and that is called the medulla. And then there is pons, and pons is the region which is connecting the brain to the spinal cord. Here you can see the pons, and this is your spinal cord and this is the brain. So pons is the interconnecting region between the brain and the spinal cord. So yeah, that's it. And you can also add that the sleep-wake cycle of your body is also being controlled by the pons region. So that's pretty much about the structure of brain and most of the important concepts regarding the functions of each and every part. This is one of the very most important and a weightage holding part in this chapter structure, like in this chapter control and coordination. So yes, that is pretty much about our animal nervous system, how an animal body is responding to the stimuli and how it is acting when an emergency situation is happening and everything. And now we need to discuss what is happening in the plant body. So coordination, this control and coordination which is happening in a plant body is very much dissimilar with the human system or an animal system, because the plant body is already absent with these kind of cells, which are the neurons, right? So the plant body do not have any such entire system called a nervous system, or it do not have any particularly evolved cells which is specialized in nerve impulse transmission like a neuron as we have. So let's see how these plants are coordinating these processes. Okay. And plants in the case, we can see plants രണ്ട് type of movement നമുക്ക് കാണാൻ പറ്റും. So plants have this growth independent movement and also growth dependent movement. Okay. So these different movements are being controlled by different parts of the plant, and let's see what are they. So the first one is growth independent movement that is happening in plants. അതായത് ഒരു എക്സാമ്പിൾ കാണിച്ചാൽ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് അത് പെട്ടെന്ന് മനസ്സിലാവും. So this you know the touch me not plant, alle tottavadi or namma mimosa pudica. So this touch me not plant, once you touch it, it suddenly gives the response of the closure of leaves or this drooping of leaves, right? So this is a movement. A drooping ennu parayunnathu oru movement aanu, but there is no particular growth happening. adondana idine growth independent movement ennu vilichirikkunnu. So this touch me not plant is an example for this kind of growth independent movement, and here you can see no particular growth happening just because of that movement. But then in the case of then there are certain other cases in plants where you can see that growth is associated with the movement. If the plant is moving, then a growth is happening. So let's see what that kind of movements are. So here these growth dependent movements, four of the most important movements are the phototropism, geotropism, hydrotropism and chemotropism. Let's see what each of them are. So the first one is phototropism. So as the name itself suggests, it is something related to photo, that is light, right? So plant growth or movement which is in response to the sunlight, or sunlight is acting as a stimuli here. Such movements are called as the phototropism. And here both the shoot and root of the plant can respond to sunlight, and shoot always respond towards the light and root always responds away from the light. That's the basic differences, and you need to note it down. Shoot is always moving towards the sun, while the root has this tendency to always move away from the light. So if you keep a potted plant in a dark room and you give a light at one end of the room, you can within few days you can see that the stem of the plant will bend towards the light coming region. Okay, that's why the stem is showing a positive phototropism. That is, stem is moving towards the light. That is why it is positive phototropism. And then if you take a case of roots, and if you accidentally or if you for experimental purpose, if you just let down a potted plant like this, if you just knock it down, and you can see that within few days the plant shoot will always grows upward towards the light, but the root always have this tendency to grow downwards, which is against from the light. So thus that kind of movement where the root is moving away from the light is called the negative phototropism, and root is the best example for negative phototropism. Okay, and then you have the geotropism, which is, the concepts are almost similar but it is different. Let's see. So the plant growth of movement which is in response to gravity. So gravity is the stimuli here. Such movement is called geotropism. So both the shoot as well as the root do respond to gravity just like they respond to light, but the responses are different. Shoot always have the tendency to grow against the gravity. So if you take the case of a plant, you can see that the plant stem always grow upwards, while the gravity is always a force going downwards, right? It's a pulling force towards the earth, so it is acting in the opposite direction. So gravity goes in the downward direction while the stem grows in the opposite direction. So you can see that a negative geotropism can be seen in the case of plant stem always exhibits a negative geotropism. Okay, but in the case of a root, it is completely different. If you take the case of a plant, here the stem is, and if you take the root of a plant, you can see that the root of the plant always have the tendency to move downwards. That is towards the gravity. Gravity is a pulling force in this direction, right? It moves in this direction or downwards. So root also has this particular tendency to move towards the gravity, and since it is moving towards gravity, you can call it as positive geotropism. So it is completely different from the phototropism, but the concepts are similar. Yes. And then you have hydrotropism. Hydrotropism is nothing but the plant growth in response to water. So a pretty good example is here itself. When there is a plant and the availability of water is in scarce, wherever the water is available, the root always go and find the water. So the root always goes to find the water. That is, it is always showing a positive hydrotropism. Yeah. And in the case of stem, the stem has this tendency to move away from the water region, or you can see that the stem is always growing upwards while the water availability is in the root region or at the downward position. So the stem has this tendency to grow away from water while the root has a tendency to grow towards water. And finally, you have the chemotropism, which is the movement, plant growth or movement towards a response called chemical. So wherever the stimuli is chemical, you can say that the plant movement or growth which is in response to a chemical stimuli is called chemotropism. So a pretty good example or classic example for chemotropism is the growth of pollen tubes towards ovule. That is, here you can see the cross section of a flower, and you can see the pollen grains on the flower here, and this is the stigma part of the flower, and this is the part where the pollen grains fall and it moves, right? So here it is. So this is a cross section in a diagrammatic representation. So this is the stigma part of the plant. That means the part where the the pollen grain is falling upward. So a pollen grain has already fallen here. In the figure you can see a pollen grain has already fallen on the stigma and it is moving. Somehow this pollen grain which has fallen on the stigma can move any direction. It can move to the sepal region, it can move to the petal region, but no, it is moving directly into the ovule region. How is that happen? So this pollen grain which has fallen upon the stigma somehow finds this solution to reach the particular area where ovule is present and they get fused. So this particular movement is a chemical stimuli. That is, certain chemicals are produced from the ovary region or from this ovule region by the plant itself in order to attract the pollen grain. And pollen grain can detect these particular chemicals ejecting out of the ovule region, this from the carpel region of the flower, and the pollen grain always moves towards that chemical. So here you can see the presence of chemical directing the movement. So that is the classical example for a chemotropism inside the plant. I hope it's clear. Yeah. So that's pretty much about the concept of coordination in plants. Okay. So basically the growth dependent movement and the growth independent movement. These are very important topics to be discussed, and you need to focus on it during the exam viewpoint. Okay. So the next thing that we need to discuss in this chapter is the hormone in animals and plants. Okay. Okay, let's see. So in order for a plant or an animal to make a movement, of course, nervous system is very much important, because once the nervous system is blocked, the body may not be able to move at all. But still, not only nervous system, but you can see muscles are also taking part in the movement. In the case of animals, you can see that when the impulse is given through the nerves to the muscles, then the muscles can move. Then the effect is there. So nerves are needed, muscles are needed, and other than that, certain hormones are also needed in order for these changes in the body happening, or in order for the body to make a move. So hormone is another kind of supporting system that is present not only in animals but also in plants, so that particular coordinated movements are done. Yeah, so let's see the hormones. As you already know, as you already know, hormones are basically some chemicals, right? These are some chemicals that are present inside the body, and it can act like a messenger molecules in the body. They can convey certain message from one area to another area of your body, or let it be a plant body, and they are needed only in a very trace amount. They are a very little is enough. They can make bigger changes with that trace amount. So hormones are basically produced by the structures called glands in our body, and we have endocrine glands as well as exocrine glands. Exo is something seen outside and endo is inside, or you can say that the production of the gland is basically to outside and to inside, so respectively the name is given. So let's see what they are. If you are talking about these exocrine glands, you will quickly understand. If I say salivary gland is an example of an exocrine gland, that is these glands which are present under the tongue, almost near our buccal region, mandibular region. These are salivary glands. The depicted ones are salivary glands. These glands have the production of saliva, right? And this saliva is ejected towards the outside. That is, the saliva basically comes out into our mouth to the outside region. So that is called the exocrine gland, and sweat gland is such another exocrine gland. And what we need to focus is the endocrine glands that is present inside the body. And the endocrine system is the system of glands which are producing most of the important hormones in our body. So the endocrine glands are also the ductless glands. That is, in the case of exocrine glands, you could see that the salivary gland which is producing the saliva takes out the saliva through a tube, or there is a pathway to come out. But in the case of endocrine gland, it doesn't have any tube or any particular pathway to carry on the production of that gland. So it basically ejects out these chemicals or these hormones into the bloodstream, so that it lets the bloodstream take all the function. Okay. So that's about the endocrine gland. And inside the human system, in male and female system, separate endocrine glands can be seen. Almost all the glands are similar in both sexes, but except the testis and ovary. So let's see the glands. The first and foremost gland is the hypothalamus. And hypothalamus is a gland which is seen in the forebrain region, and it is related with the releasing of growth hormone releasing hormone, which is a primary example of a releasing hormone. So hypothalamus is something that can release two types of hormones. One is a releasing hormone and the other one is inhibiting hormone. So example for a releasing hormone is a growth hormone releasing hormone, and inhibiting hormone is growth hormone inhibiting hormone. It's a primary example. And the major functions of this growth hormone releasing hormones are to stimulate the pituitary gland. The major function is to stimulate the pituitary in order to produce the further hormones. So that's it. So hypothalamus, yeah, here you can see the area of hypothalamus present, and then there is pituitary gland which is attached to the hypothalamus. So yeah, here you can see the pituitary gland. So this is the hypothalamus, and just below the hypothalamus you can see this bilobe structure. This is almost looking like two peas, right? Yeah, it is getting attached to the hypothalamic region, and pituitary gland is the region which is producing hormones like the growth hormone. So the functions would normally be to produce or stimulate the growth in all parts of the body. So as you already got the idea, hypothalamus produces the growth hormone releasing hormone, and that acts upon the pituitary in order to produce growth hormone. That's the basic idea. So hypothalamus basically stimulates the pituitary to produce the needed hormone. So that's the point. And growth hormone is not the only hormone produced by the pituitary. There are several other hormones, but I just showed you the a cliche example. So once these pituitary hormones are not properly exhibited, or they're not properly acting or produced, you can see major various kinds of issues happening in your body, or you can see the growth developmental issues. This gigantism and dwarfism are classic examples which is due to the deficiency or overproduction of growth hormones. So dwarfism is a condition where the short stature of a body is projecting, and that is due to the deficiency of growth hormone in childhood time. And while gigantism is a condition where the excessive growth of body can be seen, and this is due to the excessive secretion of growth hormone during the childhood. These are the classic examples. And then the third gland we need to discuss is the pineal gland, which is also another gland, small gland, which is present in the forebrain region here. Here you can see the small pineal gland. Although its structure is small, its function is very important. It produces a single hormone, and that hormone is called melatonin. And melatonin is basically known as a biological clock of our body. This hormone acts like a clock of our body, and it is regulating the 24-hour rhythm. Our sleep and wake cycle and everything is controlled by this particular hormone, which is produced by the pineal gland. Then there is the thyroid gland, which is seen at the either sides of your trachea. So here it is. So this is a butterfly shaped gland which is bilobed and is present at the tracheal region, and it produces several hormones, and thyroxine is one of the most important hormone produced by thyroid gland, and thyroxine can regulate the carbohydrate, protein, fat metabolism. So basically the metabolism of your body is under control of thyroxine, and without thyroxine all these metabolism would collapse. And one of the important point to note it here is that iodine is one of the most important mineral that is needed for the thyroid gland to produce enough thyroxine, and that's why we use this iodized salt, the salt which is already having added iodine. So enough iodine is needed in order to produce thyroxine in enough amount. So the disorders related to our thyroid gland is that one is hyperthyroidism. Here you can see thyroid gland makes too much thyroid hormone. When an excess amount of thyroid hormone is produced, that condition is called hyperthyroidism. And goiter is such a condition where the glands get swelled, and you can see the bilobe structure just expulses out of the throat, and it looks like a disturbing structure out of your throat. So that is goiter. And then there is hypothyroidism where the secretion of the hormone is very less. And all these have their own symptoms. We need not to go there. The fifth gland we need to discuss is the parathyroid gland, which is present just behind the thyroid gland. So this is the behind portion of your thyroid gland, and here you can see these blue buttons. These are seen in pairs, and these are the parathyroid gland which is producing the hormones, parathormone, one of the very most important hormone that is taking care of the calcium level of your blood. Yes, and then you have the sixth endocrine gland, that is thymus, and thymus is a thymus is a gland which is present at the center of your lung. So you can see between the lungs, above the heart. Yeah. So thymus is producing this hormone called thymosin, and thymosin is taking care of most of the immune system functions. So thymus is mostly absent during the adulthood because it is almost completed. Its production and function is almost completed in the childhood time. So yes. And the seventh gland is the pancreas, which is seen just behind the stomach. Yeah, here you can see. This is the stomach region, and here this yellow shaped globular structure, which is looking like a leaf shaped structure. That is the pancreas, and pancreas is producing this major most hormones like insulin and glucagon, which you will be already knowing. Insulin has the function of decreasing the blood glucose, and glucagon has the function of increasing the blood glucose. So they are acting opposite to each other, or they complement each other. And yeah, so whenever these hormones are absent or in higher amount, it is basically affecting the blood glucose level. It can cause you diabetes mellitus. Yes, and then the eighth gland is the adrenal gland, which is a cap above the kidney. So it's a gland which is seen just above the kidney, and it is producing several hormones. And adrenaline is one of the major most hormone produced by the adrenal gland, and this adrenaline has several functions. So here you can see the fight and flight response. How you respond during an emergency situation, how you respond during a fight situation when you have to defend your body. your heart rhythm, everything is being controlled by this adrenaline. So increasing the heartbeat, increasing the oxygen supply to your body, increasing the blood flow to the skeletal muscles, so you can either run or you can fight. So increasing the breathing rate, decreasing the blood flow to skin. So you can see that in an emergency situation, when you are scared or when you're having a frightened moment, you can see you get pale, your skin gets pale, and that paleness is due to this absence of blood flow to the skin, and that is also a function of this particular hormone called adrenaline. And then comes the testes and ovaries. So they are these complementary structures seen in male and female. So testis is producing testosterone in a male body, just like how ovaries are producing estrogen or progesterone in a female body. So testis is basically taking care of all the male secondary sex characters, all the characters that is happening to the sexual part of your bodies during the puberty period. That are your secondary sexual characteristics. So these are the testes. They are seen in a pair, and they are placed inside the scrotum, which is a sac-like structure outside the body, in order to protect the temperature maintenance and all. And then comes the estrogen and progesterone, which are the female hormones and produced, you can see they can be produced by the ovaries. And estrogen is something taking care of the female sex organs, regulating the menstrual cycle, etc. While progesterone is always known for its pregnancy capacity. That is, it is known as the pregnancy hormone. It holds the pregnancy. So yeah, these are the ovaries, again bilobed, or not bilobed, they are the globular structures present in pairs. So yeah, that's pretty much about the human hormones, or the hormones produced in animal body. Well, as I've already said, not only animals but also plants have this hormone production, right? So let's quickly see how plants are producing hormone, not how, but what all hormones are produced and their function. So hormones and their functions are enough to study from this portion. So plant hormones, the first and major most one is auxin, and this is a plant hormone which is synthesized at the shoot tip, and it always is produced towards the detection of light. Once the plant stem or the shoot tip detects the light, then the auxin production can be seen, and this auxin is always helping in the cell growth. So basically what happens is, here you can see when the sun is here and the light is given from here, you can see the auxin production happening inside the shoot tip, and the plant grows like that. But if the sunlight moves towards another position, you can see the auxin get deposited in the opposite direction of light. If the light is coming from this direction, you can see the auxin getting deposited in the opposite direction. So once the auxin is getting deposited in this direction, that causes a bending of the shoot. That shoot bends and it moves towards the sun, and that is how it is helping in the growth of that shoot. So yeah, that's pretty much about the auxin. And then you have gibberellins. Gibberellins are another plant hormone, basically the ones that is helping in the seed germination. Yeah. So it promotes seed germination, growth of stem, etc. So basically it is also an elongation function, but germination is one of the most important function done by our gibberellin. Then comes the cytokinins. Cytokinins are also another category of plant hormone which is helping in the cell division, that is promoting cell division. It accelerates the cell division, and because of that, these hormones are seen in the region where rapid cell division is seen. Wherever the plant is quickly dividing, wherever a sudden division is needed, and in all those regions you can see this particular hormone called cytokinins. So yes, and because of this particular property, the cytokinins can be seen in fruits and seeds and all, because they are the part where high metabolism is happening. So yeah, it promotes growth too. So cell division and growth promotion are the functions of cytokinin. And finally, there is abscisic acid. Abscisic acid is another plant hormone which is just different from all these hormones that we have discussed. That is, it is promoting nothing. It is promoting nothing, but it is inhibiting the plant growth. The function of abscisic acid is to inhibit plant growth. So that is like wilting of leaves. You can see the plant depth and senescence and old age, everything getting related to the particular hormone called abscisic acid. And there is another hormone called ethylene or ethylene acid, which is the fruit ripening hormone, which is helping in the ripening of fruits, and it is the only hormone. It is the only hormone that is present in a gaseous form in plants. So yeah, so that's pretty much about the hormones in plants and animals. And with that the chapter is almost over and we can conclude it. So these are the pretty important ideas from the chapter control and coordination, and these topics are important in the case of an exam viewpoint. When you're quickly going for an exam review, these points can be refreshed for the better exam things. Okay, so that's it. That's pretty much about control and coordination. With that, I'm concluding this session. Thank you so much. Thank you.